The executioner's first swing missed. Instead of a clean cut, the axe slammed into the back of the queen's head. It was a gruesome start to a gruesome end, a death as controversial as her life. In front of several hundred witnesses, a sovereign monarch, anointed by God, was about to be butchered on a black-draped stage. But this wasn't just an execution, it was the explosive finale of a decades-long rivalry, a clash of faiths, and a spy movie conspiracy that went all the way to the top. This is the brutal execution of Mary, Queen of Scots. So how does a queen end up on an executioner's block? To get it, you have to understand the world Mary Stuart was born into. She wasn't just a queen, she was a threat. Crowned Queen of Scotland, at just 6 days old, she was a Catholic monarch in an age of violent religious warfare. But her real power, the thing that made her so dangerous, was her bloodline. Her grandmother was Margaret Tudor, sister of England's King Henry VIII. That one simple fact made her a living, breathing alternative to her cousin, the Protestant Queen Elizabeth Thorvers. For nearly 20 years, Elizabeth tried to contain that threat. After a string of disasters in Scotland, including her husband's murder and being forced to give up her throne, Mary fled south in 1568, hoping for help from her cousin. What she got was a gilded cage. Elizabeth, knowing a free Mary was a danger she couldn't afford, put her under house arrest. For 19 years, Mary was a royal prisoner, shuffled from castle to castle, a pawn in a game for the English crown. But even a pawn can be a powerful piece. As long as Mary lived, she was a magnet for Catholic plots and a symbol of hope for anyone who wanted to see Elizabeth gone. And one man made it his personal mission to make sure that threat was eliminated for good. 19 years is a long time. For Mary, it was a slow-motion fall from power into solitary confinement. Now, this wasn't your typical prison with stone walls and iron bars, at least not at first. She lived in a kind of enforced luxury, hosted by English nobles, but always watched, always controlled. She had her ladies-in-waiting and the trappings of royalty, but it was all hollow. Every letter, every visitor was being watched. This long imprisonment was actually a brilliant strategic move. If Elizabeth had executed Mary right when she arrived, it would have been an act of war, infuriating Catholic France and Spain. But letting her go free was just as dangerous. It would be like unleashing a rival who could rally armies against her. So Elizabeth chose option 3, containment. Keep her close, keep her comfortable, but keep her powerless. The thing is, power is hard to extinguish. Mary was smart, charismatic, and never for a second forgot she was a queen. From her plush prisons, she kept up a constant stream of letters to Catholic allies across Europe and to secret supporters in England. In the eyes of the Pope, who saw the Protestant Elizabeth as an illegitimate ruler, Mary was the rightful Queen of England. This created a constant state of paranoia in Elizabeth's court. Every year, the threat of Mary seemed to grow. Plots, both real and imagined, were everywhere. The Ridolfi Plot in 1571 and the Throckmorton Plot in 1583 were major conspiracies aiming to kill Elizabeth and put Mary on the throne, usually with the promise of a Spanish invasion. Both were discovered, and the plotters were brutally executed. But Mary was never directly touched. Elizabeth just couldn't bring herself to harm her cousin, partly because of family, but also because she believed in the divine right of monarchs. If a queen could be tried and killed by her subjects, was any ruler truly safe? Mary's very existence was political poison. To her supporters, she was a Catholic martyr. To her enemies, she was a scheming traitor. For Elizabeth's council, and especially for her spy master, something had to give. They were convinced that for Elizabeth to live, Mary had to die. But they needed proof, cold, hard proof of Mary's involvement in a plot against the Queen. And if that proof didn't exist, well, they were more than happy to help create it. Enter Sir Francis Walsingham. As Queen Elizabeth's spy master, Walsingham was a man practically forged in religious fire. He was a radical Protestant who had been exiled during the reign of the Catholic Bloody Mary, and it left him with one unshakable belief: Catholicism was a threat to England's survival. He was brilliant, he was ruthless, and he ran a massive network of spies and double agents across Europe, all with one goal: protecting Elizabeth I. For years, Walsingham had seen Mary as the single greatest danger to the kingdom. He had even created a document called the Bond of Association, where thousands of Englishmen swore to execute not only anyone who tried to harm Elizabeth, but also the person in whose name the plot was made. The target couldn't have been clearer: Mary, Queen of Scots. But he still needed a smoking gun. That gun came in 1586 with the Babington Plot. A group of young, passionate Catholic men, led by the idealistic Anthony Babington, hatched a plan to assassinate Elizabeth and, with Spanish help, put Mary on the English throne. But Walsingham wasn't just one step behind them. He was 10 steps ahead. His agents didn't just discover the plot, they nurtured it. A key conspirator, Gilbert Gifford, was actually Walsingham's double agent. It was Gifford who set up a secret way to smuggle letters to Mary, who was then imprisoned at Chartley Hall. The plan was brilliant. Letters would be hidden in a watertight case and stuffed into the bung of a beer barrel delivered to the castle. Mary, thinking she finally had a secure line to the outside world, walked right into the trap. Every single letter that went in or out of that beer barrel was first sent to Walsingham's office in London. There, his master codebreaker, Thomas Philippus, deciphered them. The letters were then resealed and sent on their way, with neither Mary nor Babington ever knowing their deepest secrets were being read. In July 1586, Babington wrote to Mary outlining the plot, including the assassination of Elizabeth. The trap was set. All Walsingham needed was Mary's reply. On July the 17th, she wrote back. In a long, detailed letter, she gave her blessing to the invasion. Crucially, she didn't object to the assassination plot. Now, historians still debate this, but some sources suggest that Walsingham and Philippes may have added a forged postscript to the letter, asking Babington to name the men who would carry out the assassination, creating even more damning evidence. With Mary's letter in hand, Walsingham had everything he needed. The web had closed. On August 11, 1586, Mary was arrested while out for a ride. The Babington plotters were rounded up and subjected to the full horror of a traitor's death: hanged, drawn, and quartered. Now all attention turned to the captive queen. The trial of Mary, Queen of Scots, began on October 14, 1586, at Fotheringhay Castle. It was a legal spectacle unlike anything England had seen, but let's be honest, it was a trial, in name only. The verdict was decided before it even began. This wasn't about justice, it was about political necessity. Mary was seated facing a commission of 36 of England's most powerful men, including her arch-enemy, Francis Walsingham. From the moment she walked in, she fought back. She argued that as an anointed Queen of Scotland and a foreign sovereign, an English court had no right to try her. "I am no subject," she declared, "and I would rather die 1,000 deaths than acknowledge myself to be one." Her protests were ignored. Then came the procedural injustices. She was denied a lawyer, a right even a commoner would have received. Her private papers had been confiscated, leaving her no way to prepare a defense. She wasn't allowed to see the evidence against her or cross-examine the witnesses. The trial became a dramatic showdown. Mary, alone, against the entire English state. The prosecution presented the copies of the decoded letters, which seemed to show her full support for Elizabeth's assassination. Mary was ferocious. She claimed the letters were forgeries. She looked Walsingham right in the eye and accused him of engineering the whole thing. "Look to your consciences," she warned the court, "and remember that the theater of the whole world is wider than the Kingdom of England." despite her passionate defense, the outcome was never in doubt. On October 25th, the court found Mary, Queen of Scots, guilty of treason. The sentence was death. Now only one person's signature stood between Mary and the axe, her cousin, Queen Elizabeth I. The guilty verdict put Queen Elizabeth in an agonizing position. For months she hesitated, torn between the relentless pressure from her council and her own conscience. Parliament formally begged her to authorize the execution, arguing that as long as Mary lived, Elizabeth's own life was in danger. But for Elizabeth, it wasn't that simple. Signing that warrant meant ordering the death of her own blood. More than that, it meant executing a fellow anointed monarch. It would shatter the sacred mystique of royalty that protected her own throne. If one queen could be killed, what was stopping it from happening again? She was also terrified of the international backlash. Executing Mary could provoke the wrath of Catholic Europe, triggering war with Spain or France. Even Mary's own son, James VI of Scotland, sent protests, though it was pretty clear he wasn't exactly eager to have his mother back in Scotland, complicating his own rule. Haunted by the decision, Elizabeth wavered. She raged at her advisors for putting her in this impossible spot. Some accounts say she secretly hoped someone would just assassinate Mary quietly in her cell, sparing her the public fallout. She even hinted as much to Mary's jailer, Sir Amyas Paulet, but he refused, saying he wouldn't stain his conscience with such a deed. Finally, on February 1st, 1587, she gave in and signed the death warrant. But even then, she couldn't fully commit. She gave the document to her secretary, William Davison, with fuzzy instructions, later claiming she told him to wait for her final command. But her council wasn't taking any chances. Fearing she'd change her mind again, a small group met in secret and sent the warrant to Fotheringhay Castle without telling the Queen. When Elizabeth found out Mary was dead, she was furious, throwing Davison in the Tower of London as a scapegoat. It was all political theater, a way for the Queen to have plausible deniability. But it was too late. The wheels were already in motion. On the evening of February 7, 1587, the Earls of Shrewsbury and Kent arrived at Fotheringhay. They entered Mary's chambers and read the death warrant. She was to be executed the next morning at 8. According to eyewitnesses, Mary received the news with shocking calm. She placed her hand on a Bible and swore her innocence. When the Protestant Earl of Kent sneered that an oath on a Catholic Bible was worthless, she coolly replied, "Should I swear on a book in which I do not believe?" She was denied her request for a Catholic priest to hear her final confession. Left alone with her servants, she didn't spend her last hours in fear. Instead, she began to prepare for her death with the dignity of a queen. She ate her final supper, even raising a glass of wine to her grieving staff and asking them to drink to her. She spent hours in prayer and carefully divided her money and belongings among her loyal household. Then she sat down to write. Her last letter, written at 2 a.m, was to her former brother-in-law, the King of France. In elegant French, she wrote, "I am to be executed like a criminal at 8 a.m. She maintained her innocence, framing her death not as a punishment for treason, but as a martyrdom for her Catholic faith. Her final thoughts were for her servants, begging the king to ensure they were paid. She signed it, "Your very loving and most true sister, Mary R." The R for Regina, Latin for Queen. She was a queen right to the very end. On the cold morning of February 8, 1587, the Great Hall of Fotheringhay Castle had been turned into a theater of death. A large wooden scaffold, draped entirely in black cloth, stood in the center of the room. Several hundred local lords and gentry had gathered to witness the unthinkable, the public execution of a queen. At the appointed hour, Mary entered. She didn't look like a prisoner. She moved with the grace of a monarch at a state function. She was dressed in black satin, with a long white veil and a rosary at her waist. As she walked to the scaffold, she made small acts of defiance. When the Protestant Dean of Peterborough started a sermon, she ignored him by praying loudly in Latin. One of the most telling moments came when the two executioners knelt before her to ask for her forgiveness, as was custom. "I forgive you with all my heart," she told them, "for now I hope you shall make an end of all my troubles." Her ladies-in-waiting, Jane Kennedy and Elizabeth Curll, began to sob. Mary comforted them, telling them to rejoice rather than weep, because her suffering was almost over. Then she asked them to help her disrobe. As they removed her black outer clothes, there was a gasp. Beneath the somber black, she was wearing a petticoat and bodice of deep burning red, the liturgical color of Catholic martyrdom. She was crafting her own final image, ensuring she would be remembered not as a traitor, but as a martyr for her faith. With a small smile, she joked that she never had such grooms before, nor ever put off her clothes before such a company. One of her ladies blindfolded her. She knelt, placed her head on the low block, and stretched out her arms. Her last words were a cry in Latin, "In manus tuas, Domine, commendo spiritum meum." "Into thy hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit." The crowd held its breath. The stage was set for a swift end. But what happened next was a display of horrifying incompetence. The executioner raised the heavy axe. The first blow missed her neck, striking the back of her head. A low groan was heard from the crowd. Most accounts say Mary herself made very small noise or none at all. The unnerved executioner swung a second time. This blow hit her neck but didn't cut all the way through, leaving the head attached by a piece of sinew. He had to saw at the remaining flesh with the axe to finish the job. Finally, it was done. The executioner picked up the head by its famous auburn hair to show the crowd, shouting the traditional, "God save the Queen!" But in a final macabre twist, the head dropped from his hand and landed on the scaffold with a thud. He was left holding only a wig. Mary's real hair, now visible to the shocked crowd, was short and shockingly gray. The gruesome spectacle wasn't over. One shocking eyewitness account claimed that Mary's lips continued to stir for a quarter of an hour after her head was cut off. Then, as the executioners began to remove her clothes, another surprise emerged from under her blood-soaked skirts: her little Skye Terrier, which had been hiding there the entire time. The dog, now drenched in its mistress's blood, refused to leave her body and lay down in the pool between her severed head and torso. It had to be forcibly taken away and washed. The officials moved fast to stop Mary from becoming a Catholic relic. Everything on the scaffold, the block, her clothes, the black cloth, was burned. Her body was embalmed, but her entrails were secretly buried within Fotheringhay Castle. Against her wishes to be buried in France, her body was sealed in a lead coffin and hidden for months before being given a Protestant burial at Peterborough Cathedral. For Queen Elizabeth, the threat was gone. Mary's execution did, however, help push King Philip II of Spain to launch his invincible armada against England the next year, an invasion that failed spectacularly. But Mary's story doesn't end there. In 1603, Queen Elizabeth I died childless. And in a twist of fate Mary would have loved, the man who inherited the English throne was her own son, James VI of Scotland, who now became King James I of England. In 1612, James ordered his mother's body to be moved from Peterborough. He commissioned a magnificent white marble tomb for her in Westminster Abbey, the resting place of English monarchs. And in a final, poetic irony, he had her buried in the chapel directly across from the tomb of the woman who signed her death warrant, Queen Elizabeth Thorfars. There they lie today, rival queens in life, silent neighbors in death. The life of Mary, Queen of Scots, was a story of tragedy, ambition, and terrible luck. Her botched execution became the defining image of her legacy, transforming her from a failed political player into a romantic, tragic figure, a Catholic martyr who faced her end with a courage that stunned even her enemies. She was a queen born to rule, who lost one kingdom and fought for another, only to be trapped by her cousin's fear and the schemes of a spy master who saw her as the ultimate threat. Her death was a brutal act of statecraft, a moment of high drama that secured one queen's throne while turning another into a legend. If you found this dive into the dark side of royal history compelling, be sure to like and subscribe for more stories from the past. Now we want to hear from you. Let us know in the comments. Was Mary a guilty plotter who got what she deserved, or was she the victim of a ruthless setup? We'd love to know what you think.